Hello, we are going to do X-bar and R-bar charts for problem 6.1 in the Ross book as an example. And what I like to do is set up things so it's just easy for me to grab my data for the line graph. So you can see down here I put in the information that I'm going to need to make the X-bar chart and the R-bar chart with our mean and upper and lower control limits and so forth. So first we need to figure out how to calculate all those numbers, and we'll start by taking the mean of each of these samples. We're looking at the proportion of medication to saline solution, and of course we don't want that to vary widely. We know it's going to vary a little bit because it's not absolutely perfect when we mix IV medications, but we want it to be pretty tightly controlled within a tight range. So first of all, let's take the average for each of these columns, and we can go up to formulas and look at recently used. His average is one I use quite a bit, so I'm pretty sure it's there. But we can also find average in under a few other categories up here, or just start typing average. And then it's going to ask us what's the range we want to take the average of. And we just copy this column or drag our cursor across the column we want the average. There we go, and click OK. Now I'm going to drag this across because I want to take the average of each of these columns. So I go in the lower right hand corner where that little plus sign is, and then it allows me to copy all the way across. So there we have it, the average of each of those samples. 8 samples in all, an N of 6 in each one. Next, I want to take the grand mean of all of those means. So again, I'm going to go up to and do average, and I want to this time capture these 8 cells to take the average. There we go, 21.35, and that looks about right. I always kind of eyeball what I get in the end to see, does that look right? Does it seem right? And it does. We've got one lower one that's going to drag it down a little bit. Next, we want to calculate the range of each of these columns, each of these samples. So to do that, I type in equals for a formula, max, and then, oops, that says mass, parentheses, and I'm going to again say I want what's the maximum value within this sample, and then I'm going to subtract the minimum value in the same range to give me a range of 12. And if we look at this, we can quickly see, yeah, that's right. There's 24 is the biggest, minus 12 is 12. So the range of this data are 12 data points. And then I want the range of each of these columns, so I'm going to copy this formula all the way across, and I get the range. And we can see there's a couple that are a bit on the low side, so that means they're a little bit more tight around the mean, and some have a pretty wide range of 12. Then the R-bar, this will be our center line for the R-bar chart. The 21.35 will be the center line for the X-bar chart. And for the R-bar chart, again, we want the average. So actually, I can just copy this formula down and make life a little easy for myself because it's the same range, just one cell, one row down. And so the average for the ranges is 9.38. Okay, so let's start filling in the data a little bit here. For the X-bar chart, we want to have this data set up here. Now I don't have to do this, but I'm just, because it makes it so easy, I'm going to copy that row down. And so I'm going to put X, or the cell equals D12, that number. And then because I want to capture all these numbers across and not a specific cell, I'm just going to copy, and it will adjust to each of these cells. It'll move along and capture that entire row down here. Okay. Whereas for my center line, I want that value to be the same. This is how the data varies over the samples, and we'll want that to be our line that goes sort of up and down on our chart. And the central line is going to be the grand mean that I found up here. So it's this number, X bar. So I'll copy that, and then I'm going to put a $sign in front of the L and a $sign in front of the 12 so that I have, it remains fixed. It remains that number as I copy it all the way across. Okay, so 21.35 all the way across. It worked. Now we're going to do something just very similar for the R bar chart, sort of while I'm thinking about it. And we want that to be the range. So I'm going to put it equals the range. And again, I just want to copy this whole row, so we'll copy all the way across, and we get the same numbers as up here. And then for our central line on the R bar chart, we want the mean of the ranges all the way across. We just want that specific cell that we calculated up above. So again, I'm going to put a $sign in front of the L and a $sign, whoop, just one, in front of the 13. Okay, now we'll copy that and it will remain the same. So it'll be a straight line on our graph, straight through the middle. Okay, now let's do the control limits for each of these charts. So looking at our formulas down here, which I've just put on here for reference. So on this slide that we looked at in class, the lower control limit is the grand mean minus the factor times the mean of the ranges. And then for the upper control limit, it's added. So, and the factors I've copied on here too, just for easy reference. But what I did was I put these factors up above just so that I can reference them within the cell. So for the upper control limit, here's our calculation. We're going to, the upper control limit is going to be the X bar. Well, actually, I can just use the one right above it, so I don't have to copy it from there. And then it'll be plus, it's going to be the upper one, parentheses, our A factor right there, multiplied times the range, the average range, not just the range. Let's see if that gives us the right number. Yep, that looks right. And because I want this factor to remain the same, we're going to use the same factor all the way across. Again, I'm going to put $signs around the column and the row. And the same for the average of the range. I'm going to put $signs there. Okay, 25.88. So now I can just copy across, and because for the first value, for the X, the mean and the means, I've got it up above here. It will remain the same all the way across. If I'd used this number up here, I'd want to put $signs there too. But this will work. Okay. So now that's our upper control limit. And what you can do actually, if you want to be a little lazy, is copy this down, because it is going to be, wait, something's wrong here. Oh, I see. Because I don't have dollar signs in that X bar, it's giving me a completely different number. So I am going to want to change that to D19, not 20. See, it's moved down. Okay. And what else do we need to do for this one? Well, we're not going to add, right? We're going to subtract that factor to get a line that's the average range is below the middle line. Okay, so that looks right. The range, it should be equidistant on either side from this central line, and we could calculate that to make sure that 16.83 is an equal distant below from 21, or from 25.88 above 21.35. But in just eyeballing it, yeah, that seems right to me, right? Okay, we'll copy that across. This should work. Yep, it's the same all the way across. Perfect. Now we just need to calculate the upper and lower control limits for our R-bar chart. So this formula is just a little bit different. It's the factor times, or the R-bar times the factor, the appropriate factor. And the factors are different. For R-bar or X-bar chart, we use the same factor. But for the R-bar chart, we're using a slightly different one. And as you can see, a lot of them in the lower ranges are 0. And that makes sense because this is a small n. So first let's calculate the upper control limit for the R-bar chart. And we can see down here we're going to subtract factor 4, D4, from, or we're not going to subtract, sorry, we're going to multiply D4 times R. So equals, I'm going to multiply that times R, the central line. Now this time, to make it a little easier on myself, I'm going to go up and capture the value up there. And so what I want to do is, just to make this nicer, I'm going to go down to 2 decimal points. And I'm also going to put dollar signs around each of these. We don't want the factor to vary. We want it to remain the same. And we also want our R-bar to remain the same, our mean of the R's. So I'm putting dollar signs around each of these values. Okay, so when I drag it across, it's the same, because we want this to remain a straight line, right? We don't want it to vary. And then we'll do a similar thing below. Now I'm going to copy this, except this is the wrong factor. So we need to do the D3 factor, which is H16 rather than K16. So let's see if this works. So I'm just going to change the letter there, and 0, because we're multiplying it by 0, so we know it's got to be 0. So the lower control limit is just 0 all the way across. Okay, we've done all our calculations. Now what do we need to do? We need to make our charts. So we go up to Insert, and we want to do a line chart, and we're just going to do a simple line chart. Oh, back up. First, I want to capture what it is I'm doing. So first I'm going to do the data. I could do it after I do that, but just to make it really easy, I'm going to capture it first. So this is the data for our X-bar chart. Then, here we go. There it is. Move it up here so I can see. And so the range over here is 0 to 30. So in just eyeballing this, This number on the left is getting pretty close to the lower range, but for the most part it's really around the central line, which tells us, well, that's really great. That's pretty tightly controlled, the ratio of the medication to the saline. Now let's do the R-bar chart. And because I've got my labels over here, they show up nicely on the side. So insert the line chart, and then here we go. So are the ranges remaining within an acceptable range, or are they wild? So yeah, they're all within a pretty good range too. So in looking at this, I could also make these charts a little bit nicer with titles and so forth. But in the interest of time, I'm not going to do that. In eyeballing these, what are the conclusions we come to? Well, we can say that it's stable. It's a stable process. If we'd had a trend up here where we saw more that were getting on the low side, we might want to say, gee, we want to take more samples. But it looks like that was a fluke of just that one sample, and it was within the acceptable range. So overall, we're good.